Rex had served his country for 8 years without question, earning 3 Purple Hearts and the unwavering respect of every soldier who fought beside him. But when the army tried to force him into retirement, this decorated military dog did something unprecedented. He refused direct orders. What Rex had discovered about General Morrison would either save the base or cost him everything he'd ever fought for. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade grounds of Fort Braxton as Sergeant Maria Martinez adjusted the ceremonial, ribbons on Rex's service vest. The German Shepherd sat perfectly still, his dark eyes scanning the preparations for what was supposed to be his retirement ceremony. At 8 years old, Rex had served longer than most human soldiers, accumulating a service record that read like a military legend. 3 Purple Hearts decorated his chest, earned through shrapnel wounds in Afghanistan, a roadside bomb in Iraq, and burns from a chemical weapons facility in Syria. Each scar on his body told a story of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to the soldiers who fought beside him. Rex had saved dozens of lives, detected countless explosives, and never once hesitated when duty called. "I know you don't understand what's happening today, boy," Sergeant Martinez whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she straightened his collar. "But you've earned this retirement. 8 years is a lifetime for a working dog. It's time to rest." Rex's ears twitched at her words, but his attention was focused elsewhere. For the past 3 weeks, something had been bothering him, an instinct, honed by years of detecting threats that others couldn't see. It started with subtle changes in General Morrison's routine, scents that didn't belong in secure areas, and behavioral patterns that triggered every alarm in Rex's highly trained mind. General Morrison was scheduled to present Rex with his final commendation this morning before the dog was transported to a retirement facility in Virginia. But Rex had no intention of leaving Fort Braxton. Not when he knew what he knew. The ceremony was set to begin at 0900 hours in the main assembly hall. Rex had attended dozens of military ceremonies over the years, always the perfect soldier, sitting at attention, following commands without question. But today would be different. As Sergeant Martinez led him across the parade grounds, Rex's nose detected something that made his blood run cold. The scent was faint but unmistakable, the same chemical signature he had learned to associate with enemy ordnance during his deployments. But this wasn't a battlefield in Afghanistan or Iraq. This was Fort Braxton, one of America's most secure military installations. The assembly hall was filled with personnel from across the base. Colonel Williams, the base commander, stood at attention near the podium. Major Thompson from Intelligence was reviewing his notes. Dr. Sarah Chen, the base veterinarian who had treated Rex's combat wounds, smiled at him from the audience. But Rex's focus was entirely on General Morrison, who was adjusting his dress uniform near the stage. Morrison was a decorated officer with 30 years of service, a man who had earned the respect of soldiers throughout the army. His record was spotless, his leadership unquestioned. But Rex's nose never lied, and right now it was telling him that General Morrison carried the scent of explosives, fresh, recent, and completely unauthorized. The ceremony began with Colonel Williams delivering remarks about Rex's distinguished service. As the words of praise filled the air, Rex remained perfectly still, but his mind was racing. 3 weeks ago, he had detected that same explosive scent in Morrison's personal quarters during a routine security sweep. 2 weeks ago, he had found traces of it in the general's staff car. Last week, he had followed the scent to a storage facility on the outskirts of the base, a facility that wasn't supposed to exist on any official records. When General Morrison stepped to the podium to begin his presentation, Rex made his decision. Instead of sitting at attention as expected, he stood and began walking toward the exit. "Rex, stay!" Sergeant Martinez commanded, her voice sharp with surprise and embarrassment. Rex paused for a moment, looked back at his handler with eyes that seemed to communicate something beyond the capacity of normal military working dogs, and then continued walking. The assembly hall fell silent. In 8 years of service, Rex had never disobeyed a direct command. Military working dogs were trained to absolute obedience. Their lives and the lives of their handlers depended on it. For Rex to simply walk away from a ceremony in front of the entire base command was unprecedented. General Morrison's voice carried across the hall. "Sergeant Martinez, control your animal." But Rex was already pushing through the exit doors, his purposeful stride leaving no doubt that this wasn't random behavior. Sergeant Martinez followed, her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. "Rex, what's gotten into you?" she demanded as they reached the hallway outside the assembly hall. Rex turned to face her, his intelligent eyes holding hers for a long moment. Then he did something else he had never done before. He barked once, sharply, and began walking toward the base intelligence center. Sergeant Martinez hesitated. In 8 years of partnership, she had learned to trust Rex's instincts implicitly. His behavior during combat had saved her life more times than she could count. If Rex was acting unusual, there was a reason. She followed him through the corridors of Fort Braxton, past confused personnel who had never seen the base's most decorated military working dog behaving so erratically. Rex moved with clear purpose, his nose working constantly as he followed a scent trail that only he could detect. Their destination was General Morrison's private office in the command building. Rex stopped at the door and sat, the military working. Dog signal for explosive device detected. Sergeant Martinez felt her blood turn to ice. "Rex, are you sure?" Rex remained in position, his body rigid with alertness. This was the posture he had maintained in countless life-or-death situations overseas, the stance that had saved dozens of soldiers from hidden bombs and ambushes. Meanwhile, back in the assembly hall, General Morrison was completing Rex's retirement ceremony without the guest of honor. His speech about the dog's faithful service was met with polite applause, but many in the audience were still confused by Rex's unexpected departure. Colonel Williams approached Morrison after the ceremony. "General, that was highly unusual behavior. From Rex, perhaps we should investigate." "The animal is clearly suffering from stress-related behavioral issues," Morrison interrupted smoothly. "Combat trauma affects working dogs just as it affects soldiers. He needs immediate retirement and psychological evaluation." But Colonel Williams had served with Rex for 3 years and had never seen him exhibit anything resembling psychological instability. The dog was known throughout the base for his calm demeanor and unwavering focus. Outside Morrison's office, Sergeant Martinez was facing the most difficult decision of her military career. Rex's alert position indicated the presence of explosives, but they were standing outside the office of a 3-star general. Accusing a high-ranking officer of possessing unauthorized ordnance could end her career, or worse. She pulled out her radio and called Major Thompson from intelligence. "Sir, I need an immediate consultation at General Morrison's office. Rex has indicated a potential security concern." Major Thompson arrived within minutes, accompanied by 2 military police officers. When he saw Rex maintaining his alert position outside Morrison's door, his expression grew serious. "How long has he been signaling?" Thompson asked. 15 minutes, sir. He led me directly here from the retirement ceremony." Thompson studied Rex carefully. He had worked with military working dogs for over a decade and knew their capabilities intimately. Rex's reputation was legendary. His detection accuracy was over 99%, and he had never given a false positive alert in his entire career. "Do we have a warrant to search the general's office?" one of the MPs asked. "Rex is probable cause," Thompson replied grimly. "His nose is admissible evidence in military court." As they prepared to enter Morrison's office, Rex suddenly stood and began walking rapidly toward the building's rear exit. His behavior had shifted from alert to urgent, the difference between detecting a static threat and tracking a moving target. The group followed Rex through the building and out into the motor pool area, where General Morrison was loading a large duffel bag into his personal vehicle. "General Morrison," Major Thompson called out, "we need to speak with you." Morrison turned, his face showing momentary surprise before settling into authoritative calm. "Major, I'm in the middle of official business. What's this about?" Rex had positioned himself between Morrison and the vehicle, his body language indicating extreme alertness. His nose was working constantly, and low growls were emanating from his throat, a sign of imminent threat that Sergeant Martinez had learned to recognize during combat operations. "Sir, we have reason to believe there may be unauthorized explosive materials in your possession," Thompson said, his voice carefully neutral. Morrison's laugh was perfectly calibrated, just the right amount of surprise and indignation. "Major, that's a serious accusation. Based on what evidence?" Thompson gestured toward Rex. "Based on the most reliable explosive detection system on this base, sir." For a moment, something flickered across Morrison's face, a brief crack in his composed facade. Rex caught it immediately, his growling intensifying. "That animal has clearly suffered psychological damage from his combat deployments," Morrison said. "Using a traumatized dog as evidence for such serious allegations is—" He was interrupted by Rex launching himself toward the duffel bag. The German Shepard's training took over as he performed the final phase of explosive detection, physical indication of the target. "Rex, stay back!" Sergeant Martinez shouted, terrified that her partner might trigger an explosive device. But Rex's training was too precise for such mistakes. He positioned himself at the bag and performed the passive alert that had saved countless lives overseas, sitting rigidly while pointing his nose directly at the source of the explosive scent. The military police officers immediately secured the area while Thompson called for the explosive ordnance disposal team. Within minutes, Fort Braxton was in lockdown as EOD specialists approached Morrison's vehicle. "General, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle and submit to a security screening," Thompson said. Morrison's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what you're doing, Major. The enemies of this country are everywhere, and sometimes difficult decisions have to be made to protect American interests." "Sir, please step away from the vehicle." Instead of complying, Morrison reached toward the duffel bag. Rex immediately launched himself forward, his combat training overriding all other considerations. The German Shepherd tackled Morrison away from the bag, just as the general's hand closed around what appeared to be a detonation device. The EOD team moved in immediately, securing the device while Rex maintained his position on top of Morrison. After 8 years of military service, the dog had finally encountered an enemy on American soil. The investigation that followed revealed the scope of Morrison's betrayal. The duffel bag contained enough C4 explosive to level the base intelligence center, along with detailed plans for destroying classified information that Morrison had been selling to foreign agents for over 2 years. Morrison had been feeding information about American troop movements, weapons systems, and strategic planning to a network of international buyers. When an internal security audit began closing in on his activities, he had planned to destroy the evidence and eliminate the investigators in a single devastating attack. Rex's behavior during the previous weeks suddenly made perfect sense. His highly trained nose had been detecting trace amounts of explosives that Morrison had handled during his preparations. His reluctance to leave the base wasn't psychological trauma. It was the instinct of a soldier who had detected a threat to his unit. The military tribunal that followed Morrison's arrest revealed the full extent of his crimes. Dozens of American soldiers had died because of information he had sold to enemy forces. Weapons shipments had been intercepted, safe houses had been compromised, and strategic operations had been sabotaged. But perhaps most shocking was Morrison's planned finale. Intelligence analysts determined that his attack on Fort Braxton would have killed over 200 personnel and destroyed intelligence assets worth billions of dollars. Rex had prevented not just a terrorist attack, but one of the most devastating acts. of treason in American military history. 3 months after the incident, Rex faced another retirement ceremony. This time, he was receiving the Medal of Honor, the first military working dog in history to be awarded the nation's highest decoration for valor. As Rex sat at attention while President herself pinned the medal to his vest, Sergeant Martinez wiped tears from her eyes. Her partner's refusal to follow orders had saved hundreds of lives and exposed a traitor who had hidden in plain sight for years. "You know," Colonel Williams said to her after the ceremony, "maybe it's time we reconsidered what we mean by following orders. Rex showed us that true loyalty sometimes means having the courage to disobey." Rex was offered retirement once again, but this time the decision was his to make. Given a choice between a peaceful farm in Virginia and continued service at Fort Braxton, Rex chose to stay. At 8 years old, he wasn't ready to stop serving his country. The intelligence center that Morrison had planned to destroy was rebuilt with enhanced security measures. A bronze statue of Rex was installed at the entrance, with an inscription that read, "True loyalty knows when to say no." Dr. Chen, who had treated Rex's combat wounds for years, marveled at his continued service. "Most dogs his age would be slowing down," she told Sergeant Martinez. But Rex seems to have found a new purpose. That purpose became clear over the following months. Rex was assigned to a new role, counterintelligence detection. His ability to identify threats that humans couldn't see made him invaluable in identifying potential security risks and hostile agents. Major Thompson, who had been promoted to colonel after the Morrison investigation, worked closely with Rex in developing new security protocols. "We've learned that sometimes the best intelligence comes from instincts we can't measure or quantify," he explained to visiting officials. Rex's story became legendary throughout the military. His refusal to accept retirement orders became a case study in military academies used to teach future officers about the difference between blind obedience and intelligent loyalty. Sergeant Martinez was promoted to staff sergeant and became the military's leading expert on working dog behavioral analysis. Her reports on Rex's detection methods influenced training programs throughout the armed forces. But for Rex himself, the recognition and accolades were secondary to the simple satisfaction of a job well done. He had served his country for 8 years without question, but when the moment came to choose between following orders and protecting his fellow soldiers, he had made the only choice a true warrior could make. As he continued his patrols of Fort Braxton, Rex carried with him the knowledge that true service sometimes requires the courage to stand alone. His 3 Purple Hearts had been earned through physical sacrifice, but his Medal of Honor had been earned through moral courage. The military working dog who had spent his entire career following orders had ultimately saved his country by learning when to disobey them. In refusing retirement, Rex had found his greatest mission, proving that loyalty and duty are not about blind obedience, but about having the wisdom to know when the greater good requires taking a stand. Today, Rex continues to serve at Fort Braxton, his story inspiring a new generation of soldiers and handlers. His legacy serves as a reminder that true heroism often begins with the courage to say no, even when that no defies every expectation, every protocol, and every order. Rex had shown that the highest form of military service is not unquestioning obedience, but the intelligence and courage to act on moral conviction when the stakes are highest. In choosing duty over orders, he had saved not just lives, but the very principles that make such service meaningful.